You've likely watched HGTV and heard of other YouTubers talk about flipping properties and how much money they made, with profits as potentially as high as 10% to 20% or even more sometimes. But what aren't they saying? Now that's a really good question. And why is it working for them and it doesn't work for so many other people? Let's take a look at if buying a fixer-upper house is right for you. My name is Andrew Finney, and my passion is helping you make sense of real estate. If you need help finding a top agent near you, or if you simply want to drop me a line to say hello, my contact info is below. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel now and like this video. Thank you. All right, my friend, let's take a closer look at fixer-upper homes and finding out if they're right for you. There's different things that you should know about before you begin. Could you make a lot of money fixing properties and flipping them out? Absolutely you can, if you know what you're doing and if you have the time to devote to it. Can you lose a lot of money? And I'm sure that you could talk to some people that you know to find out how close to home that really is for you, because you likely know someone that's lost huge sums of money and they said it ended up being a money pit and they ended up selling the house at a discount because they couldn't sell it to anybody. So let's take a look and gain some clarity over 5 main points to know whether a fixer-upper is going to be right for you. The first point is to know if it's a winning deal or not. When we're looking at a winning deal, especially through the lens of a fixer-upper, we need to consider the cost versus value. How much is that home going to cost us in relation to the value that we can put into the home and ultimately sell it? What does that profit margin look like, and what are we going to do to the property to get the best price for it if we're going to flip it out? Now, if you're buying a fixer-upper just as a starter home or as your first home or as maybe a second home because it is in the right community for you, that is an option for you. But just consider your other options wisely, because when you look at whether it's a winning deal or not really depends on whether you're considering it for an investment or if you're considering it as a primary home that you intend to live in. Getting clear on what your objective here is with a fixer-upper is going to aid you and set you up for success. From the point of view of an investor, obviously cost versus value is going to be hugely important. They got to make sure they're going to get the return on their investment. Now, if you're looking at a community and you're like, have this community, this neighborhood in your mind's eye that is just ideal and perfect for you, okay, I can get where a fixer-upper would seem like a good deal for you. But if after you do the renovations to that property, it's not going to be worth what the other homes in the area are, or you've over improved it for that area, you could enter a very real reality called negative equity. And what happens if you have negative equity in a house and you have to sell it? That means you're going to be at a huge financial loss if you can sell it at all, or you're going to go into a foreclosure or short sale proceeding. That's why we're having this conversation now. I'm not saying that a fixer-upper is a bad idea. I'm just asking you to open your eyes to the reality so that you know what you're getting yourself into beforehand. I completely understand what it's like to want to sometimes buy the worst house in the nicest community, because that's really where you want to be. And if that's your situation, all I'm asking you to do is to gain clarity as to the reasons why you're buying that property and the reality of what kind of projects you're going to be taking on. The second thing is, how handy are you really? Are you a do-it-yourselfer that can just watch a YouTube video, or that you have experience with carpentry and you know how to make things happen? If so, rock on, because you're going to be able to do a lot of these projects yourself. Or are you that person, probably like myself, where I'm looking at contractors and the assistance of licensed, bonded, and insured contractors to help me do the projects the right way, if not all out, just do them and give me a cost. Now, there are things that we can do, from like painting a house that's going to have a massive pop appeal to it, that are pretty easy for even those of us that aren't so handy perhaps, right? And then there's those things like installing cabinetry or redoing plumbing that we really would be wise to contact the correct licensed professional to do. So it's about right now assessing and getting honest with yourself about your true DIY skill set. It's one thing to have a mindset that's positive and robust, which is always awesome. And it's also another thing to get into something that you've bit off more than you can chew whenever it comes down to your DIY skill. If you don't have experience as a DIY person doing carpentry and installing floors or hanging cabinetry, let's say, right, it's going to take a little bit of time. So I'd ask you to give yourself a little bit of a learning curve here if you do want to take it on, because it's going to have a little bit of a different outcome than when you watch HGTV or you see somebody on YouTube doing it, because those people are likely to be masters of their craft and they know exactly what they're doing. So individual results obviously will vary depending on your skills that you're going into the fixer-upper cheaper to do yourself if you're going to do it that DIY way. So if you're going to hire licensed contractors, you need to budget accordingly to ensure that you are prepared for the financial realities to get that home up to snuff just the way that you want. The third thing that you need to get real about is the time involved and how much time do you really have to dedicate to this. If you're that person that's running around and your friends call you and they say, hey, I want to take you out on Friday night, or hey, come join us on Saturday, we're going to be having a grand old time, or come join us on a barbecue on Sunday, and you're like, oh, I'm too busy, then perhaps a fixer-upper is not going to be best for you. Because if you're the person that has a very demanding career or a very demanding social life and you don't have the time to dedicate to the fixer-upper itself, whether you're going to DIY it or even manage and hire the contractors that are going to do the services inside of it to make it the right way for you, then it's going to fall apart. And we need to be honest with that. Again, if you're like an investor and you're like thinking to yourself, hey, I want to get into this and I want to flip property, I'm going to buy the fixer-uppers and I'm going to do it. Well, if you have that demanding career or that demanding social life, with what time are you going to do those projects? Because if it is your goal to do it, then just get real with your timeline that's going to take you to flip it, and get real with your carrying cost of the property. Now, if you're that person out there that's saying, hey, you know what, all these other homes are so inflated out there, they're so expensive, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the worst house in the best possible community that's right for me, and I'm going to devote my time to fixing it up. Well, again, what's your career look like? What's your social life look like? Do you have a family? Where is this time going to come from? Unfortunately, the very real reality is all of us only have 24 hours in a day, and even the most industrious and prosperous of us will have to take time off for a little bit of R&R, that rest and relaxation, to recharge our batteries and stay fresh. Otherwise, what happens if we grind too hard? Our results start to suffer. So let's make sure that, especially with a house, that the results don't suffer because you were over-tapped on your time. Consider it wisely. Plan out your timeline of a realistic timeline of what it's going to take to fix a property and flip it if you're an investor, or if you're the person that's going to be buying it as a primary residence. How much time is it going to take you to fix those baseboards, to paint that house on the inside and outside, to redo that landscaping, to do the bathroom remodel, the kitchen remodel, or the flooring change out? It depends on you and what you want to do to that property. Get clear about how much time you truly have to dedicate to the fixer-upper. The fourth thing that you want to assess is, what are the bones like? If those bones are broken, we have a major problem, because the bones of the house are most critically important, especially if you're new to the investment side of this where you want to fix and flip, or if you are that person that's looking for a primary home and you're never done a fix and flip before and you don't really have the skill set. If those bones are broken, that is not going to be cool, because bones getting broken in a house are some of the most expensive things to fix, and they must be fixed before you do any of the other projects that are already pretty costly out there. You know, let me give you an example from my own personal life, okay? I will buy a home that I know needs work, that is in a nice community, and I will over time renovate this property on a very realistic home renovation budget in the way that I timeline this out. Well, where I'm going with this is I did a bathroom remodel, and that bathroom remodel set me back $23,000. And I'm preparing to do a kitchen refresh, not even a full-on kitchen renovation. It'll look like a full renovation by the time I'm done with it, but my budget on that is $25,000. That's why my version of doing this, if you want to call it fix and flip or whatever, is to actually buy it as a primary home, fix it up over time with the aspects of a home that I know that are going to increase the resale value of the home in the future, and when the time is right, to use it as a stepping stone onto the next property that I wish to purchase, or to keep the property as a rental property. That is something for you to consider. It is certainly a strategy here, but you can't do that if the bones are broken. I always assess the bones of the house. There's certain things don't cost a lot to fix, but let me give you a list of things that will cost you a fortune. Number one is if you had sagging beams in the house. Number two is if you have really big cracks in the concrete. You should not be able to see daylight through them. It is important to note here, though, that if you have a little hairline crack in concrete, that's normal. But if you have a major crack in it and you can stick your finger in it, you can drop a quarter in it or something like that, that's a problem. And that's going to require the services of a structural engineer. And let's cross our fingers and hope it's not a major structural issue. Otherwise, you'll be looking at major dollars to fix it. The third thing to watch for are doors or windows that won't close because of the way the house has settled. Every house will settle over time, whether it's a new construction or whether it's an older home. It doesn't matter. All homes will settle. Well, if they don't settle in the right way, your door jambs and your window frames can actually become askew. And if they become askew, what's going to happen is you can't open them, you can't close them the right way, because the house itself may be leaning one way or the other. And we don't want that for you, because again, that signifies a major problem with that house, and the bones are now broken. The fourth thing is if the house has fire damage. If you have a fire damaged house, there's a lot of things you're going to have to do to meet the health and safety conditions required of residential real estate. You're going to have to get the approval from the fire department that everything is good to go. You're going to pay for all of those certifications, and you got to make sure that it's done correctly. And depending on where that fire got into, if it got into the frame of that house, guess what's going to happen? You're going to need to replace all of that stuff brand new. The fifth thing is what happens if you have structural water damage. Consider different parts of the country that are prone to floods or hurricanes, right? Well, what happens when that water gets into that structure? It can cause rot if left unattended or if not properly treated after those floods or natural hazards have occurred. If that happens and you're looking at buying a fixer-upper property because that happened in an area, and you're saying, hey, it's not a big deal, I can fix it. Be aware that rotten wood can really go a long ways to actually collapsing a house. So that's something that you're going to need to plan for and prepare for. So I'm asking you, if this is your first time around with the fix and flip, or if it's a primary hold property for you, get real about it, because these structural issues will set you back. The sixth thing is structural damage caused by termites. If the termites, again, have eaten into the frame or the foundation of that property, we have a major problem. We want to assess these things, and the best way to assess these things is by hiring a licensed home inspector that you can trust to do a solid and thorough report. Now, if you're in a home buying mode right now, what does that mean to you? Give your trusted real estate advisor a call and ask them who they would suggest for their list of home inspectors. Have a conversation with the home inspectors. Choose the one that's going to be right for you. Have them perform a solid home inspection on that house, alerting you to any of the conditions of that property and what their thoughts are as a professional of how strong the bones are of that home. Strong bones keep us growing. Broken bones make us fall. So let's make sure your new home has strong bones. The fifth thing is that your friends would describe you as a procrastinator. If you're that procrastinator out there and you're thinking, hey, a fix and flip is right for me, but you kind of kick the tire, you might have kicked the tire a while just to buy a home even though you knew you were ready, like 1, 2, 3, 5 years ago. So yeah, if procrastination is in your name, let's be honest with ourselves, because the last thing we want to do is see you get hurt. If you do real estate right, it will advance you in life. If you do real estate wrong, it can set you back in life. Hopefully after our conversation today, you now have a little bit more clarity and insight into the fixer-upper thought process of just knowing if you should be buying one and if it's right for you. Now let's take a look at 7 nightmares to avoid buying an old house and 4 tips you should know before buying a damaged house. Looking forward to our next conversation. We'll see you in a few.